The Gospel of Thomas is a fascinating book. It didn't make it into the Bible. And it's a collection of sayings of Jesus Christ, some of which you feel like you know, and some are a little eye-opening. You can find it yourself online, but the verses we'll touch on today you can see below this video. And it's interesting because the beginning of the Gospel of Thomas says immediately, it kind of gives a huge promise that if we come to find an interpretation, the interpretation of these words, we will never die, we'll live forever. What does that mean? Well, to me, I feel like the only possible explanation is that when we come to really understand these words, when we find the true interpretation in our hearts, that's already there in our consciousness, that is our consciousness actually, then we will never see death. We will never see death again. It's funny because a lot of sages promise something similar, where if you follow me, or if you read this text, or if you do this or that, you'll never die. And then we look back on history, and it seems like pretty much everyone who's looked at that text or followed that text has eventually died. So, what does it mean not to see death? I think it has multitudes of meanings. One could actually be that the person who finds this deeper meaning won't die even in a physical body, because as we know, many texts promise that in the end times there will be an elect few who will live forever in their body, taken up to heaven, so to speak, but actually allowed back on the new earth, on the new earth. Whether or not that's true, I'm not sure. But I think even for them, there's a deeper meaning, and it's the meaning that will speak to most of us today, which is that we won't find that despair, that hardship, that spiritual death that a lot of us have encountered in our past, and maybe we're on our way out of the grave. It's interesting, Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas, which is said to have been recorded by Thomas uh, from sayings of Jesus, explores this motif further by diving into what it means to really interpret and understand the Gospel of Thomas, these words. The next verse, it says that when the readers of this will discover the truth of what's been going on, the truth of uh, the deeper meaning, the truth of what's happening on the planet Earth, they will first despair. They'll despair. I don't know if you're like me today in the modern day, but as the veil is lifting from some of what's really been going on over the last few years, the last many decades, behind the scenes, I can feel a little bit of despair when I discover things that seem to connect the dots, that seem to be maybe more plausible than what we've been told. And often we have evidence for that in a lot of cases. You know, it's funny, we call it conspiracy theory until it comes out more generally, and it usually has to be pried from the hands of the people keeping that secret. And often our government isn't the one who's going to step up until they're forced to, until they have to. I mean, we see that in modern days with UFOs. Now, all of a sudden, the government is coming out here, there, everywhere, saying that these UAPs exist, that they might have been dealing with these things for decades and decades. And I don't know about you, but that opens a door to really start to wonder, what's really been going on? What's this phenomenon? Can I really trust that they don't know what's happening with any of these things? It doesn't make a lot of sense because they've known this has been going on, and yet the more forward-facing, front-facing parts of the government that looked into this have been shut down again and again. So it's interesting that we're at this day where when we uncover some of these truths, we can despair as to what's really going on. But it goes on further from there, saying that those who despair Because if you find the truth, you'll despair, it says. Will then marvel, will then marvel. Because the more we collect about what might have been going on around us, that um, the human race has been in the midst of a spiritual war, that we've been carrying the burden of, uh, let's call it hell on earth, for many decades in ways that we hadn't imagined, that we didn't really know was going on. And as we start to see the ramifications of all these things, what's really happening, we start to marvel because it's amazing. In a way, it's beautiful that we are the ones on this crazy planet. Might as well be a fantasy planet for how much it makes sense sometimes, for how much it actually uses magic, uses quantum phenomenon that seem like magic to get things done, the way things come together so perfectly at times, how providence works in the smallest details, how uh, extraterrestrials probably exist, how deeply connected we all are through consciousness. Whatever it is for you, as we start to see the beauty of this construction, despite the shadow that comes with it, right? As we start to uncover it, because if we uncover something, there's the shadow always is there, because that's what happens when you shine a light on it. Especially for something that's been hidden for so long, there's been a lot of shadow. And what's beautiful about something that's been in a box, which is most of the truths of our reality over the last however many centuries or millennia, is that although there's still a shadow, most of the shadow that was around these things, that dark box, is now gone, is now disappearing, is now finding that it has to face the light. And that there is always a place for the shadow. There's always a place to use the shadow in our lives, to use the shadow in our history, in what's going on even today, to overcome. There's always a use of those things. We can always find um, strength, actually, in even our negative emotions as they come up. And so that takes me to something I wanted to dive in on with you today, which is that our negative emotions are an opportunity. It, the Gospel of Thomas, right at the beginning, this is like second, third verse, right? There's despair, but then there's marvel. There's marvel. And then there's something even more beautiful from there, which is that those who marvel will rule over all. Well, how do we get from despair to marvel? I don't know about you, but often when I'm fighting my emotions, when I'm kind of down in the dumps and just lashing out and not wanting to really face how I feel, maybe. I mean, it doesn't seem that way to me. I'm just being me. But if I'm in that kind of state at any given moment, I'm not really accepting how I'm feeling. I'm not really looking at it. I'm not curious about it. I'm just reacting from it, or away from it, or whatever, or toward it, in a way that is blind to what's actually happening, that's just embodying that negative emotion. But if we look at that negative emotion as it arises, even right now, there's probably some annoyance that might come up, some feeling of sadness, something that we've maybe been carrying, but we don't really want to acknowledge because it's just been there for so long. As those negative emotions come up, if we look at them and really just follow them internally, not creating a story about them, or if a story is coming up, just letting that come up. Sometimes memories will come up. Sometimes a story that we added to the emotion will come up. But maybe the roots of the emotion go back further. And so as we take a few deep breaths, we can follow that emotion, not trying to escape it, whatever it is. Because we know the alternative is worse, right? It's continuing what we've been doing, continuing our reactionary living, and it just keeps coming up. That's not getting over it. It just keeps coming up. Could be fear or anxiety. Could be jealousy. Could be rage, seething rage some folks have. Could be a coldness towards what happens to anybody else. And so if we follow that as it arises, only the negative emotions though, but following those until, well, you tell me, till they perhaps dissipate, perhaps turn into the yang or of the yin, or the yin of the yang of that emotion. We come to the outer ring that connects that full yin yang symbol, or the inner ring, as we go deeper into that emotion and find that we were just a breath away from the other side. That fear was a breath away from wonder. Like, that's how cool these things are. I get to be afraid. Like, I have a body. There's maybe something around me that could hurt me. How amazing. Like, maybe there's something about that emotion that as we dive into turns to its opposite, and we realize it was almost already there. It was almost always already there. Maybe that's how we've been able to live with it as children of God. Because as the third verse of the book of the Gospel of Thomas describes, as we uncover these truths about ourselves, as we look at who we really are, we discover that we are children of the living God. We are the children of God. You know, I think a lot of times that term, that phrase, is just thrown around. We don't really look at the ramifications. It's like quantum physics and science, just kind of tossed around, and no one really looks at the ramifications of the fact that consciousness is the root of all things. But if we're really children of God, and we are ultimately this consciousness that we experience, right? That's our experience, consciousness. We don't really have much say as to where we're born, and our consciousness has to, well, it does anyway, receive these impulses, these feelings, these ideas, these thoughts as we learn, as we grow. And that light, which is consciousness, in fact, we only see light in the light of consciousness. It's our only experience of light, or even the best science experiment, is in consciousness. And yet so often we start those experiments as if consciousness was not involved from the get-go. As if the results and the apparatus and all these things around, all the things in our life weren't literally in consciousness, for us anyway, and for anyone else for that matter, and anything else that thinks and feels for that matter. So this children of God, this idea that we are children of God and that we're the light from God, perhaps the offspring of the divine light, of divine love and wisdom, is our small, seemingly anyway, smaller light. But then we realize, no matter how small we might feel, everything arises in us. And in fact, in our quantum physics, can arise without consciousness. And so we get away from the ramifications of that. As children, as one with God, we forget what it means in all our stories to be a child of God. We talk about Jesus, talk about Hercules, we talk about children of God throughout time, different sages who are incarnations of God, and we always kind of want to feel separate from them. Maybe because we think if we really accept it, we probably have to go start preaching on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram or something. But no, we don't have to do that, although there's a lot of people doing that nowadays. No, if we really look at what it means to be a child of God, what we find is our peace, just our peace. Our peace. Because what is a child of God? What is one who's one with God have to worry about? Nothing. But when we worry, there's a part of us that likes to worry. I mean, it has our interest, right? If you worry and you're not interested in it, it just goes by like whatever other thought. But there's an interest because we've kind of formed or depicted a version of ourselves that has to care, right? If we don't do that, well, I don't know what would happen, but it's going to be bad. It's not going to be what I want because I have all these earthly things that I want, and I want people to look at me a certain way, and I'm only this little human body, and go on and on, going on and on with just ideas, made up ideas that we really have no true verification of actually. All we really know is that we experience things. It's all we really know. We put words to all the things, but all we really, really, truly know is happening is that we're conscious. We're a conscious being. So we should start every experiment, whether it's in daily life or in the lab, with that, not hypothesis, but that truth, because can't get any deeper than that in terms of human experience. I'm conscious. Anything else is just subpoint. I smell, I hear, I'm thinking, I think this other thing's true, I believe that, this religion's great, that one's bad, someone's going to hell, I'm going to heaven, or I'm worried about going to heaven, I'm worried about hell, oh, this is all BS, I'm an atheist, nothing's connected, oh wait, no, things are connected, but I'm still an atheist, consciousness is all around us and we're all one with consciousness, but no, I'm still an atheist. We can go on, but the one thing that's not a hypothesis for us is that we are. And as Jehovah said in the Hebrew scriptures, when asked, what are you? Who are you? What's your name? I am. That I am. I'm that. That I am. That I am. God is our I am. Our being. It's inescapable from cockroaches on up and on down and on sideways if there is a hierarchy at all. We have to start with that light. And that light makes us children of God. Or whatever else you want to call God. So, that's the beauty of the book of Thomas to me. And it says, as we find ourselves in our true selves, here at the beginning of the book of Thomas, we find that we're children of God. And that those who don't find that are poverty itself. I love that. They're poverty. I'm in a state of poverty, and I am poverty when I don't find my true self. Because why? I'm not living in my truth. I'm living in something that just vanishes. Some idea, some belief about this book is right and that book is wrong. Whereas they all tend to say the same core message. All our sages, all the teachers today, worth their salt, say the core message, say the same thing. Some say it this way, some say it that way, some have diagrams, some have things to show us a little bit more clearly, analogies, figures, props, chemical interactions, whereas in fact, everything is showing us like that, using analogy, because we think in symbols, we connect in symbols, because everything is a symbol for what it ultimately is, which is the alpha and the omega, where it begins and ends. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can tell you what that is for me. And as we dive into what that really is, because we have a renewed interest in just our being, we discover, wow, there's a love here, because nothing else is separate from me. I know that that cockroach's experience is just consciousness in the mind of a cockroach. I'm just you in the mind of Corey. You're just me in the mind of you. Because that root is the same. That vine, as Christ said, I am the vine, you are the branches, remain in me as I am in you. Be in me as I am in you. How can we be in Jesus as he's in me? Isn't that sacrilege? Isn't that betrayal? Isn't that putting the world on our shoulders? Well, here we are. We're already carrying so much. And Christ actually said his burden is easy, is light. And he probably meant that both literally and metaphorically. So thank you for joining us here on Spiritual Sunshine today. It's been lovely connecting. I can feel that positive energy coming my way. Share your thoughts, share your ideas, because really we're here to minister to each other. We're here to share, whatever you want to call it, to uplift, to empower, and even the shadow moments as we accept those feelings can come around to something greater and higher within us. So peace to you.